Okay. Wonderful. Welcome everyone to our webinar today. I'm Liz Sanders. We are here doing local government and food systems, why it's a critical solution to climate change, jobs, waste and much more. Delighted to have you joining us. I'd just like to acknowledge I've got Kay in the room, who's our wonderful evaluator and strategic advisor. So she'll be talking as well today, and Manuela, our food citizen extraordinaire. So before we go any further, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on Kaurna land and pay my respects. Just getting these slides to work. There we are. Pay my respects to the Kaurna people of this land. As a white settler with Scottish and Irish heritage, born on unceded Kaurna land, I'd like to acknowledge the First Nations people of this land and pay deep respects to their deep connection to this land, and particularly their wisdom around food, as we talk about food today, and acknowledging that food sovereignty is really critical in this space. It was and always will be Kaurna land. I'd also like to pay respects to the First Nations people that you may be coming from today, the land that you may be speaking to today. Someone's got their speaker on. Could we just mute? Thank you. And just acknowledge that we're coming from across the country today, so there will be various lands that we're coming from. Wonderful. And also just to mention this beautiful kangaroo grass that's in this picture today. We did a recent event with an Arabana man, and he spoke a lot about the resilient nature of this grass and how it adapts to the climate, and how it used to be grown widely across Australia, and how we need to consider this wisdom and knowledge for future generations and for our future changing climate. So just a little about us, the Food Embassy. We're a small social enterprise located in the south of Adelaide. We've been operating for 5 years now. Our principal work is to educate, energise and enable communities to build resilient local food systems. And we do that principally through education and activating and supporting citizen leaders. So just a little bit about me. I'm Liz. I'm the co-founder of the Food Embassy. I've been working in the space of food for a very long time now. I grew up on a farm about 3 hours north of Adelaide, on a classical wheat and sheep farm. So we had grew wheat in the front paddock and then drove to Adelaide and bought our bread flour. So that's how crazy the system is. We grow it in the front paddock, but then we drive 3 hours to get the flour. So I am very familiar with food from a very young age, very passionate about how we need to change our food system for the benefit of everyone, really. And I think that's a thing throughout our work is really about that social justice, that we all have the right to nourishing, good, wholesome food. So we seek to host events and build community connections that provide people with the skills to influence the food system, that from what we do in our own homes to wider conversations with business, retail and governments. So today what we're going to do is take you through food systems, just to start us all off on the same page. We will then talk a little bit about the role of some key players and organisations, particularly local government, then look at the outcomes for our key thing that we deliver called Food Matters, which looks at, I'm just going to meet someone, looks at how we can inform the community around the food system. Then we have a case study from our wonderful food citizen, Manuela, and then we'll move to taking action in the space. We will stop at various points, so if you do have any comments or questions, please put them in the chat. We're really open to some conversation as we go along.
Okay.
So, my screen, there we go. So you may have seen the video that I sent you this morning from Sustain, which just depicts the food system nicely, but this is an additional slide just to reinforce what our food system looks like. So our food system is all these elements, from food production through to distribution, aggregation, food processing, marketing, purchasing, consumption and waste. So it's really important that if we are going to consider the any discussion around the food system, that we consider all these elements. And I guess that's where it can get quite complex. And that's the point of this next slide, which is a very complex slide. And you do not need to be able to read the detail, but it's just to illustrate the complexity of the food system, how overwhelming it can be, but that food has really become a highly profitable global commodity, and only for a very few. And that's largely the transitional big food players, or big food as we fondly or not fondly know them. where the value of these guys is really all about profit. So that's the big driver. So it's a system based on faith, trust, reassurance, and unfortunately ignorance. So the corporatisation of this food system has currently then brought a lot of harm to our health, our environment, and our economy. And you'd all probably be fairly familiar with some of those statistics. So 35% of greenhouse gases emissions comes from the food system, huge impact on our health, chronic disease escalating, and then of course an impact on our economy as well, particularly for farmers. So if we move now to thinking about how can we have opportunity in this, and there is great opportunity in this space, particularly if we think about food as the nexus. So here at Food Embassy, what we do is look at it through 3 lenses, or 4 in this case. So health and culture on the left-hand side here, looking at the food system through that lens, then looking at it from an environmental lens with climate change and waste, and then looking at it from an economic lens. So that whole idea of jobs, growth and development. And from this, then we can think about the possible solutions to multiple problems. However, so as I say, food is opportunity, and there is an opportunity for all of us. We all have agency in this space, and it's really critical that we get engaged. But if you do not understand your role in the problem, it's difficult to be part of the solution, as this system thinker is saying here. So if we have, I think this is the critical part that we all need to think about with this issue, and really starting from that point of informing our community is the first key role, and that includes local government, all of the players in this space, and then from that we can take some action. So why local government? Well, I've been working with local government for a long time, either as an employee or as a partner. So familiar with that space, and I guess it's that tier of government that is very connected to community. So that's the critical thing. We've found through the work that we've done that community really want engagement from council in this space, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Hello. But I want to buy more local food, as it's important to keep the money here and people in jobs, is what people were saying to us. Various councils will have various plans and strategies that and it may, originally a lot of councils' work is around those 3 R's, so roads, rates and rubbish, but you will find commonality, I'm sure, across different local government. And I think there's those commonalities of resilience, economically strong, healthy, food secure communities. So really wanting to find a hook there, and that's where the hook, I think, can be, particularly around the environmental stuff and the economic stuff. The hook into a conversation around why it's important that local government engage in this space. The other thing to think about in that space too is the fact that the food system now is yes, the corporates have a very big part of the power in that space, but they don't have all the power, and there's many diverse players in the space, and so that's where the opportunity is. So to think about where the leverage is for local government or for your organisation in this space, and how you can have a role, because that's the key to getting some change, is that wide collaboration across agencies and sectors and players, having a diversity of approaches and embracing the messiness, because we're working in systems. It will be messy, and it will be fun too, but it will also be, so you've got to be ready for the ride. And I guess it's about celebrating the small wins. But just to make the point about messiness, we will have an individual context that we work in, so there'll be barriers and enablers in that. We'll have a organisational context that we'll work in that will also have its barriers and enablers. Then there's a political context in that. And then there's also colonisation, that we all are working on unceded land, and then that also has an impact on the fact that we're growing food on this unceded land with a strong colonial history. So just to conclude with that, I think the key thing now is to think about how we inform local government and inform our communities, because without an informed, vibrant civil society, they're the ones who are going to drive this change as well, and a key part of what we call the Great Food Transformation. So this is exactly the work we do at the Food Embassy, is we build an informed community, and we do that principally through these ways. So Food Matters events, which I'll talk to more in a minute. We do food system training for local government and organisations. And there's a quote there of a recent one that we did. Part of that training is a very engaged training where we look at different case studies across the country and across the world to get councils mobilised and again hook them in to what is potentially possible in this space. And then the final aspect we're doing is mentoring of citizen leaders, which again, we'll have a case study on that in a little while, just to see what we've achieved from that. Moving now to what is Food Matters. So Food Matters, as I alluded to, is our key offering that we do at the Food Embassy. And we have been doing this for some time now. It came as a course out of the, from Flinders University. It was an online course. And the principal thing was why we were doing this is our wellbeing's linked to the health of our environment and our food system. Changing our food system is a significant way that we can impact on the on our climate, and it's to support our local farmers and producers. So we started with this 4-week course looking at exploring the impact of our food choices on our environment, farmers and bodies, and we'll talk a little bit more about what's come out of that course in a minute with Kay. But since COVID, we've had to move to standalone events. So we now do 4 standalone events, and we ran these recently in Alexandrina, which is south of Adelaide on the coast. So the first event is Food and Country, which looks at the food system through an Indigenous lens, and absolutely critical to start that space, I guess, when we're talking anything about food systems. Then looking at it from Food Freedom, which is hearing it from the farmer perspective. So that's looking at it through the lens of the economic lens and hearing from them about local food sustainability. All of these events have guest speakers as part of it. It's a key part of the events. Then we move to What is Your Food Print, which is looking at it from a health lens. So learn about the best foods for your health and the health of the planet. And that's again a practical workshop with some guest speakers. And then the final one, Building a Local Food Community, is about a social lens, social and cultural lens really, and hearing from past participants about how they're building a resilient local food system. So that's how the our key offering looks now, the Food Matters program. So I'm now going to turn to Kay, who's going to talk a little bit about the outcomes of that work so far.
Thanks, Liz, and hi everyone. So I have a background in community nutrition and academia, so I've come in to work with the Food Embassy around coordinating evaluation as a way of, I guess, telling the story of the good work done by this small social enterprise. So this first slide, I've tried to aggregate impact evaluation of a range of Food Matters courses and events over 2020 and 2021. And I have to say that the data is a little bit wobbly because we were experimenting with a few different, slight variations to the evaluation design. And so, and as well, because of COVID, quite a bit of the evaluation had to be done online, which meant a low return rate. So you can see that the returns somewhere between 23 to 38 are quite small, in spite of over that time, I think Food Embassy reached about close to 300 people. So we just picked a few parameters under sort of knowledge, attitude, and then I guess social capital. And you can, and really, I want, and we used a method called the simultaneous pre-post-test design. And you can see that there's a really positive trend in each of those categories around people understanding environmental sustainability within the context of the food system, their feeling of confidence to take action to build a more sustainable local food system. And probably the best result, and in some ways the best question, was around social capital and people's feeling of increasing feeling of being connected in their local community. So next slide, Liz. I guess what I felt I had more control over was I coordinated a qualitative evaluation of the program with those same cohort of people and looking at knowledge, attitudes, and behavioral changes, and also feedback on the Food Matters program. We once again, because of COVID, we did in 2020 one of the focus groups, and the interviews, 3 interviews had to be done online for the focus group and by phone for the interviews. But you can see that in terms of knowledge, starting with the left-hand side, I think spot.
Sorry.
Most participants, oh no, we'll go back to that one, the first one. Participants reported learning many things that were useful about eating sustainably and supporting a more sustainable food system. Going down, I guess for us, that one of the key, probably the strongest findings are really in attitudinal shifts. And people really talked a lot about thinking more critically about the food system and their own food choices. They thought a lot more about the ethics of food purchases, and they wanted to use their food money to support local food producers. Going on to the right-hand side, in terms of behaviors, they did, most of them reported making the sort of expected changes to their personal eating around sustainable eating lines. So they were consuming less meat, less processed foods, more plant foods, cooking from scratch, engaging in gardening and composting, buying local foods, and minimizing their family's food waste. And happily for Food Embassy, they were unanimously satisfied with the Food Matters course and how it was run. So next page, just a few quotes to support those findings. And these were very typical quotes. So you can see, sorry, Liz, the slide before that.
Oh.
Purple. Yes, that, no, the one before this one. Yes, okay, stop there. So I'll read them out. One respondent says, once again, on the top left-hand side, the course made me think a lot more about the ethics of food and the way food is produced. And that is something that I hadn't really thought about before. Liz, you jumped a slide. Can you go back to the one before? Don't know why it's doing that. Another quote is, it just makes you think rather than automatically go to a supermarket and buying off the shelf. Liz, can you take me to the slide before, please? And on the right-hand side, a typical comment was, a lot of people talked about feeling empowered. And so a typical comment was, I think you can feel overwhelmed, but for me, it was more about empowering me. You know, you can make a difference and you can have some power over your food choices and where you buy and what you buy and how much you buy. And the final quote, I try to use everything from scratch, hardly use any packaged foods. And we've submitted that piece of work for publication and it's currently under review. Yeah. So Liz, thank you, Liz. Now, if you can go to the next slide. So I just wanted to pull out some quotes around an unexpected finding for us, which was around food citizenship and pointing to a key role of local government. Excuse me. And it really speaks to people's, as Liz said before, their desire to engage with local government and their understanding that local government is critical to some of the localized food system changes that they wanted to see. So once again, I'll read out some of these quotes. Somebody says, I think it comes down to the council. Maybe we could communicate with the council so that it would be easier for people who wants to grow their own vegetables. So people who live in apartments, maybe they can have some connection with the council so that they can look at having some sort of land to grow or rent land or make community garden more accessible for people. Another quote, more positive, from my experience, we wanted some trees out in the street because it was so bare out there. So I just emailed the council and they were excellent in their response. Excuse me. And yes, we've got our trees. And the last quote, there's a really great piece of land that is community land, that is council land. So it's Verge. I always look at it and I think I'd love to get in contact with the council and see if we can, instead of planting flowers and hedges and things, that we plant food, be that nuts or whatever, it might be fruit trees. I haven't really pursued it to go, all right, I'll go into the council and talk to them, or if so, yeah, where to start and how to go about it. So just really highlighting that for residents, there are also constraints around their confidence to engage with council. Next slide, thanks, Liz. Feedback on the program, on the Food Matters program. Once again, we just picked three sort of strong or common areas that people talked about. The one before Liz, around learning, inspiration, and social capital that we talked about before. Yes, this one. So some typical comments. What the course did is that it set me on the trajectory to find the things that I needed to find. And another one saying, I learned a lot. I think a lot of us did. And under inspiring, you know, the inspiration by hearing others' stories is really important. To meet people who are doing this successfully and learn their tips and tricks. So Liz talked about guest speakers. People were really loved the guest speakers and hearing their ideas. And under community networks or the social capital, which we found to be a very strong feeling for people, typical comments, it gave me the network of people that I needed in order to sort of branch out and reduce the distance that my food traveled to reach me. So that was great. And one of the key features of the Food Matters program was a shared table where people could bring produce or plants or things that they'd made. And this one says, the things that people brought, fruit and veg that I had never heard of, and just the sharing. So final slide is around Food Matters Phase 2. So after the education program, Liz, the Food Embassy is moving to mentoring people in their local communities to bring about change. And Liz, I'll hand over to you to talk about this because you've been much more intimately involved in this than me.
Thank you, Kay. Okay, so this is our next part of the Food Matters offering where we work with food citizen leaders. This infographic is possibly a little hard to read, so I'm just going to take you through it. But we did some mentoring in Alexandrina, so the area that I mentioned where we'd run the series of events earlier this year. And out of that, we put out an expression of interest to the group of who might be interested in building their local food community. And we had about 6 applications for that and chose 3. And these are the 3. So there was an opportunity to work with us around their project to take it to life, I guess. So the first project was what they call the Fruit Loopers, which is a gorgeous name for a group of enthusiastic gardeners in Strathalbyn, based at the neighbourhood centre, who were really interested in looking after people's fruit trees. So there's a lot of fruit trees in the neighbourhood and in the town, which they had seen that were not being well cared for, and this would enable greater produce being collected as well as being cared for. So that's what they've started, the Fruit Loopers, and they feel like they've made a real difference already, only with a short period of time to try that before the pruning season ended. They've already recruited some new volunteers as well, which is great. The second project on the right is bringing more local food to Goolwa, another small town in that area, with Merle, and she was really passionate. She was new to the area and really interested in how we could engage more local producers and get better access to local foods. So she went on this journey of discovering more about her community and finding what some of the backstory is for people. And one of the key things out of that was a gathering of like-minded locals to explore better local food access and build connections. So that was great, small steps. And this is the thing with the messiness of the system. It's about nudging the system slowly and celebrating those small wins. And I guess the next aim there is to continue to advocate further to council for how we can support local business and have better access within the community. Then the final project is one called a Farmer Safety Net, which was from Simon, and really about, he was quite blown away at our Food Freedom event when he heard from a local farmer about the farm waste and the massive issue of farm waste and how that could be redistributed, particularly to families in need, but to the general community. So what we did there was, what he's done there is actually working really localised with a small group of local community to build those community connections between farmers through events. So he's going to run a series of events leading up into the new year to really build those connections between farmers and community, and to look at the waste on those farms and how they can redistribute that. So that's just an insight into the Food Matters and where we've got to with that offering of how we inform our community. I now like to take you to our next looking at, sorry, my computer's being very sticky today. There we go. And our next lovely offering is Manuela Brockman, who is one of our wonderful food citizens, who has been engaged in our work for quite some time. I'll let her tell her lovely story of her journey with us. Thank you, Manu.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Manuela. Like Liz Porter.
Sorry, Manu, I'm just going to get people to mute themselves if they. Thank you.
Sorry.
Keep going,
Okay.
Manuela.
All right. I did one of the first workshops with the Food Embassy. That was around 3 years ago. And it was called the first taster workshop in Woodcroft. And I joined this one through my university degree. I got an email sent and I thought I'd give it a go and join this workshop. And I got so inspired by all the information what the Food Embassy provided us during this workshop. So I went to our local primary school and approached the principal if we could maybe create a bit of a gardening group for the children there. So long story short, the principal agreed to it, and now 3 years later, we have a quite a formed group every year, and this year I can always take 10 children on, and this year in the beginning of the year 30 kids applied to be part of the gardening group. And in this slide there you see what we just picked maybe a month ago. We had a lot of greens, we had big potatoes, and that is always the most exciting things for kids, to pick these potatoes. So good fun. And yeah, so we distribute all this produce in front of the school. So when children and parents come by on the way home, and everyone picks away something, it's always nice to see kids walking through the streets with some green in the hand. And then further down my journey, I continuously stayed in contact with Liz in particular from the Food Embassy, and I thought, you know, if I can do something like this, more people in our community who are like-minded would like to achieve other things too. And so I contacted, because I knew some moms at the council, so I approached the council if they would be interested to connect with the Food Embassy and hold some workshops down our way. And so that's how it started. The first initial contact with the Food Embassy through myself and the Alexandrina Council. And as Liz mentioned earlier, we were able to hold these amazing workshops where you can connect with like-minded people, exchange ideas, and work on projects together, and share food, like Kay mentioned earlier. And continuing on my journey, I was creating my own little contribution to our local food system. So I created my own brand called The Healthy Sparkle, and I create nutritious delights like muesli bars, granola, mini loaves, and much more. And I'm using, if Liz would show the other slide, as you can see, I use a lot of local ingredients, what is really in the Fluria area. You can see I had more, but I couldn't fit any more on the slide. So you can see how you can support local businesses by buying local ingredients to use in your products and sell to your local community. So this is a bit my contribution, and it became quite successful. And a lot of orders come in constantly, and so I thought I can expand my business a bit more into a catering side, and working close together with the Food Embassy and the council. So they knew me already, so I got approached from the council to do one of my first catering events for a food system event through the council and Food Embassy. Am I right? Yeah.
Yes.
This. So I had the opportunity to showcase some of my products, what you saw in the first slide, this little plate with all sorts of different goodies. So yeah,
There it is. Beautiful.
so I have to really say a big thank you to be able to join the Food Embassy in the first place, and I highly can recommend to everyone who has the opportunity to join in one of their events or workshops. It's really the best thing what happened to me, to be able to do what I do now. So I'm continuously go to events because you meet so many interesting people who are, like I mentioned earlier, like-minded, and you exchange ideas and you listen to people, and then you find opportunities again to get people to connect with each other. You know, everyone knows everyone, but you don't have to know everything. That's, yeah. So yeah, that's from me. So I hope.
Thank you, Manuela. Lovely. Can I just ask you to just share with people this beautiful slide here that you presented, this food on the right and what's on there, so that people get an idea of how you use native food?
Okay, this little, it was a lemon myrtle pavlova. So the pavlova itself, I added some lemon myrtle, and then I did use some local cream from the Florio milk. And then I added some homegrown peaches preserved and some strawberries on top. And then I sprinkled it with some, dusted it with some strawberry gum. Then the mini loaf, I used from the Small World Bakery, is a stone ground spelt flour, what they grow on their own property, also in millet there, freshly ground. Then in there is some warrigal green, what is a native spinach. And I also added some Tasmanian mountain pepper and some, oh, now I can't remember, oopsie, and some lemon myrtle and saltbush I put in this one. And yeah, that's some savory mini loaf. So yeah, and fruit skewer adds a bit of color. So yeah.
Totally and utterly delicious. Yeah. Thank you, Manuela. A wonderful example of what's possible from a local food citizen. And if I just come back to the final slide there, showing all the producers that she now supports. So the economic impact of the work that Manuela does is really, I think, significant. And this is a thing to be talking to local governments and other organisations about, how the roll-on impact of a business such as Manuela. And I know as she continues to grow, there will be job employment too, opportunities for people too that may be able to work with Manuela as well. So I think that's a significant and great example of what's actually possible from this work. Wonderful. Okay, just to wrap up that kind of talking about local government, I just wanted to draw in a couple of those key learnings that I've got from engaging with local government. And that's around finding those hooks, which I've referred to, and they could be personal hooks. It could be finding that someone in your local council or council law is interested around food or the environment, or it could be about jobs, whatever it is. It could be about the strategic plan, looking at the timing of when they're done and when they're up for review, and seeing that as an opportunity. And I'll talk to that in a moment, a story that we've had success with. Or it could be the community, that they're really councils are really about, generally strongly about community engagement and how you engage a vibrant community and support them. So that could be the hook. one of the other key things is to communicate clearly and often and over again. This is a really complex system. One of my colleagues in Alexandrina is very good at this, and I take a leaf from her book really about how important it is to say things in different formats and say it often, so that people start to come onto the page. And of course, finally, by no means finally, but absolutely critically, is collaboration, and collaborating with a range of partners and agencies, and perhaps the unusual ones too in that space. And I think we need to think about how we engage with those who are immersed in the industrialised system as well. So just a quick story of success with collaboration that we did, the Food Embassy, with the City of Onkaparinga Food Security Collaborative, so another organisation here working strongly around food security. We worked in partnership with them. We've done a lot of work with them, but we looked at the local community capacity strategic plan, and much to our horror saw that food was not on there. So we did some advocacy to councillors and to the mayor, so wrote letters and then got a meeting with the mayor and some councillors and council staff. And after some time and toing and froing, we actually got food back on that plan, which was an exciting outcome, but a real great example of the agency we all have as individuals, whether it be as ratepayers or even within council, what you can actually achieve. And I think it's really important that we think about how we can really start to shift this system and nudge it forward. So we're going to take a stop there for a second, and I really like to get people just to have a think about where they're at now. What's one thing that has surprised you so far in the conversations that we've had so far in this webinar, and what are you now thinking about? So just take a moment to perhaps share that with us. I'll bring us off the share screen. We can either do that face to face, or you can put it in the chat. So I'll ask people just to see what they're curious about, or what they're thinking about in this around food systems. And it may not be just particularly local government. It could be other organisations that you may work for or that you engage with. Has anyone got a comment or questions?
Are we allowed to speak? Sorry.
Yes, you are allowed to speak. Absolutely. Hello, Leah.
Hello. Leah from Tassie. Hello to everybody. What a great presentation. I feel quite uplifted by that, and particularly around the very high level of engagement you've had from everyday people in your community. And I think sometimes that can be a struggle. Do you have any sort of idea of the sort of profile of the people that have engaged, for example, through your 4-week course and the events? Like, is there a typical person that engaged? Yeah, why don't you tell me about those people, if you wouldn't mind, please?
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite diverse, really. If I go back to the courses, because we've had to pivot and change a bit, the courses were generally people that were already on the sustainability journey, I would say. They were probably a range of ages, largely women, of course, a couple of blokes, but yeah, we had a smattering of ages, if I think about, but generally speaking, middle-aged probably people. And in terms of demographic, we haven't done a lot of demographic data, but most of them were probably middle class, had some background with completed study, and but we have done, some of our courses have also been in low income areas, so it's changed again. So we actually have had some pockets where we've done a course where people are more from a low income area. Then our more recent events in Alexandrina that I mentioned, we had about 80 people, I think, attend those 4 events, and across that area has a older demographic, so they were mainly retired people. But again, it was interesting, depended on the event. If the Food Freedom event with a young farmer attracted young people, we had a lot more blokes at that. And so, yeah, it's really diverse. Which is really interesting. And, and we're now actually, our next course of events we're running is just targeted at young people. So we'll be running in the City of Adelaide. We've done a survey to get their interest. We've had about 60 responses to that. So there's a lot of interest in that from young people, which is no surprise, really.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Leah. Anyone else got any other questions, comments, things they're curious about? Want to know more about?
I've got another one.
Great, keep
I
going.
almost got another one, sorry. I'm really interested in the course content. And is that open source? And I mean, I've asked a question about evaluation because I've just started work on a project here in the Huon Valley, and I just think that this might be an interesting approach for the advisory group to consider from an engagement perspective. So are your resources for the course open source?
Not at this point. We are looking at how we've been talking with other people interstate actually as to how we can look at what format that will be in. We're a small, social enterprise, so how we can format that and continue to get some income from that too as well. So yeah, just looking at that, what that might look like. We've been exploring doing an online course as well, or an online series of events as well. Awesome Train the Trainer is the other thing that's come up for us as well. How we could train other areas across the country. It needs to happen. It needs to happen now. Yeah, get everyone engaged.
It does indeed. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Leah. Anyone else before we move back to the presentation? Feel free to just put a comment in.
Liz, I might add that there's a couple of chat comments praising you, Manuela, or congratulating you on your leadership and your business. So that's lovely.
Yeah, nice. Thanks for that, Kay. Okay, I'll just go back to this sharing the screen. Okay. So how can we take action in this space? Well, as I've said, getting informed, we can provide some training, reading lists, tips for engaging in government. I encourage you to host, sponsor or attend a Food Matters event. So please get in touch with us. We are looking at how we can take this across the country. Join a local relevant network, I think is absolutely critical about those extra points of leverage in this space. So the Food Systems South Australian Network is a local government network that has come out of some research that's doing some mapping across local government jurisdictions in South Australia. So that's a great network to join here if you are in South Australia, or the South Australian Urban Food Network, or for those of you across the country, there is Sustain's community of practice that they're doing around supporting people working in local government. And if you're not familiar with Sustain already, then certainly they're the national network in this space. So I encourage you to join up with them. But I really encourage you just to keep talking to us, I guess. I think lots can happen when we're all talking together, and the potential for some innovative and exciting collaboration, is what would be really exciting out of this work, I think. So they're my contact details, and I'm going to finish today on these couple of quotes. So this one here actually comes from the States. The first one, local and regional food systems are about opportunity. And I think this beautiful picture that I've been using throughout the presentation comes from Edible Adelaide in 2016. We looked at a visioning exercise of what Adelaide could look like. And I think it depicts beautifully what could be possible around regen farming, lots of sharing in schools, farmers markets, lots of food everywhere, lots of diversity, and people well and happy in that space. The final quote there is this one from the Eat Lancet Commission: the great food transformation can only be achieved with all actors in all parts of the food system working collectively towards this transformation. So again, that thing that I've been talking about, how we all have got some agency in this, and it's just finding our point of action in that, and how we could all contribute to working towards this great food transformation that is really needed. So that is the end of our presentation for today. We've finished with a little bit of time. For anyone else got any other comments, we're going to, we have recorded this, so we will share this with you all. We will also send a follow-up email with some great reading resources, and please, like I said, stay connected to our work. Wonderful. Is there anyone else got any other comments or questions before I sign off for today? Beautiful. Thank you everyone for joining us.
I might just add before we sign off, just to join that last slide that you put up with the earlier one, what we call the spaghetti diagram, the complexity of the food system. I think just to emphasize that there are so many points of entry into the working on the food system and improving the food system. And in that Willett et al. Comment about kind of the transformation is needed, and it needs multiple players and all players in the end. And just to say, I guess the Food Embassy's strength is in community engagement, and the team at Food Embassy brings enormous experience in most of us were community nutritionists, not all of us, and so we really know how to work with community, and you would have gathered from Food Matters that is one of the real strengths of this little social enterprise, and an essential part of any political change is engagement of the community. And so I think that is a real strength that the Food Embassy brings into this space, and offers any and all of you who are interested in doing something in some work in this area.
Thank you, Kay.
Can I just say one? I just want to sing out to Amy, who I see is on the line as well. She's got an event coming up about a new resource for local government.
Thanks, Leah.
I'd like to plug her event coming up if people are interested in local government.
I did switch my mic on to do just that, and then kind of chickened out and was going to send an email to see if Liz and the gang could circulate it. But thanks for that, Leah. So hi, I'm Amy. I work on an ARC funded project, and Karen's also on the line, I think, with Karen and Nick Rose, who's from Sustain, and Belinda Ree from the University of Sydney. And we've been looking over the past couple of years at how local governments in New South Wales and Victoria are involved in creating healthy, sustainable and equitable food systems. And we've also been looking at civil society organisations as well. So as Leah said, we've got an event coming up on Friday, the 19th of November in the morning. So, and we're going to be kind of, I guess, describing some of the main findings from the earlier part of our research there, and having a bit of a workshopy type thing with breakout rooms for people to discuss what's happening in their parts of the world or parts of the country maybe. But yeah, if it is okay, Liz, maybe I can send you the link to that, and you can send that in the follow-up email to everyone, so everyone's welcome to join. Even though we focused on New South Wales and Victoria, we think it's really interesting to kind of get those insights from other states as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Amy. Yeah, that's great. Great timing, and yes, very happy to send that out and spread the word. Absolutely. Wonderful. All right. Thank you very much for your time today. It's been lovely to have you here with us, and we look forward to further conversations. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.